Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Prime Live. Today we are honored to be joined once again by Ronald Abvajee, and today we are going to discuss World Hepatitis Day, which was observed and is observed annually on the 28th of July. Now, hepatitis is a significant global health concern that is affecting millions of lives worldwide. Now, Ronald Abvajee is an esteemed health advocate to help us understand more about hepatitis, its prevention, and the efforts that are needed to combat this disease. Assalamu alaikum, Ronald. Thank you for joining us once again on Prime Live.
Wa alaikum salam. Great to be with you as always.
As always, I'm looking forward to, some insight and some information about health and wellness. And that's what I love about our conversations, is that we're able to, give viewers at home a lot of information about different diseases and ailments, signs and symptoms, what to look out for, as well as treatments. But to get our conversation started today, can you talk to us a little bit more about what is hepatitis, and can you take us through some of the different types of hepatitis that are in existence?
Hepatitis is a viral infection that impacts the liver. And there are different types. There, A, B, C, D, E, you name it, there is a version thereof or a type thereof. But it's called that because of the different impact it has and the different causations thereof. The reality is that we need to understand what is the liver and what's the function of the liver. The liver is located on the upper right side of the body, just underneath the diaphragm and the rib cage, but also it's about the size of a flattened rugby ball, right? Slightly smaller, but that size. And the liver has over hundreds of key functions. Some of them are, one is to eliminate old red blood cells. Number two, we're looking at producing bile, which is the digestive enzyme for the stomach. You then look at filtration and as well as helping the body get rid of toxins. So it plays key roles and functions in the body. And when you get this viral infection, what it does is it attacks the cells of the liver and it impacts the functioning of the liver.
There are different types of hepatitis. Let's talk about type A and type E. What are, some of the ways in which us as individuals can actually protect ourselves from getting hepatitis? Are there vaccines? What are the kinds of treatments? How do we prevent getting this viral infection?
All right, so when let's look at A, and what are the most common types within South Africa? Hepatitis A is caused by, one, you're looking at the transmission of fluids from the body. So semen, for example, blood, etc., and that exposure. Is it contagious? Yes. But especially on the digestive tract more. The reality of hepatitis A is that and hepatitis C is that one of the top risk factors is, especially hepatitis C, is men that have intercourse with men because of anal sex and because of that fluid transmission and blood in the digestive tract. You then look at hepatitis A, which is a little bit more common, more acute, but it can be resolved and sorted out. But also it's associated with food and poor food hygiene as well. So if food is being prepared in an incorrect manner with someone that has hepatitis and they're not following good hand hygiene and hygiene practices, you could be at risk of getting hepatitis as well. Now, hepatitis B is the only one in South Africa where there is a vaccine currently. The vaccine got started in 1995 when they started vaccinating babies because it helps prevent hepatitis B. But also, if you do get hepatitis B, it's not as chronic as what it can be. So when you look at those hepatitis infections, there's acute hepatitis infection, and then of course when you get to chronic, we really start getting worried about chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, etc.
Now, there are very many different variations of hepatitis. Can we talk more about D and E?
Oh man, it gets into the fact of it impacts the body so differently. When you look at the different Ds and Cs, for example, you're then looking at things like the jaundice factors, because why? There's something called the bilirubin that gets produced in the liver, and that breaks down the red blood cells, right? And it's an orange type of a substance, and yellowy orangey substance. And when that is then produced, you notice that the eyes become a little bit yellowy, which is linked to jaundice. And that shows you that it has impacted the liver to a fairly serious degree. And that's why you look at those kinds of situations, especially with C and Ds. The reality, again, is it is transmitted via similar mechanisms, and people do transmit that to each other. And again, for those that are sharing needles, don't. you're at risk of the hepatitis, right? Of hepatitis, and one of those viruses in particular. The second thing is if you do have an autoimmune disease, you are at a higher risk of that impacting you in a more serious and chronic way. And finally, we need to be aware of the fact that when you're looking at hepatitis, for those that consume alcohol, you're at risk of liver damage. And you only realize this when it's late. And that's when you get liver begins to shut down. The impact of metabolic functions and so forth is so severe. But the reality is this is, can these be prevented? Yes, be because of the vaccine, but the others, if you have a strong immune system, you're having your right fruits and veggies, you're exercising correctly, you're not smoking, managing your stress, your body's ability to tackle it in the acute stage is real. Now, when you look at the different hepatitis, they sit in incubation phase from between 5 and 50 days, especially hepatitis A and B. And further down, it sits for longer than that. And you could have hepatitis virus, but it doesn't mean it's active and impacting the liver, but you could be a transmitter thereof. So what can we do? And here's the reality. Because it's linked to semen and, of course, unsafe sexual practices, if you are engaging in sex and you are at risk thereof, or you're not really sure, use protection. So condoms are a must. Second thing is, do not share needles with anybody. The third thing is, and this is one of my fears when it comes to takeout kitchens. I don't know how good the hygiene practices are in the kitchen, and I do know that does expose me at a higher risk to hepatitis A. So just be very mindful, be very careful, and ultimately, if you do feel any of the signs or symptoms, which is very flu-like symptoms, that's the initial phase, but chronic fatigue associated with it. If it's not flu season and you do have a predisposition to an autoimmune issue, please go and check it out with your doctor.
Now let's talk about some of those, ways in which we can identify that, I think something is wrong. We've listened to the signs and symptoms. I think I need to go and get checked. What are some of the tests that are available, and how can viewers at home actually be able to access some of these tests to be able to identify if they have one of the types of hepatitis?
Right, so when you're looking at that is because it's a virus, they will do a blood test to identify is that virus present in the bloodstream, number one. Number two is they will look at the liver function, so it's blood tests, they look at liver function tests, they look at antibody tests, and they look at identifying which virus it is. Now, the one thing is from a signs and symptoms is that I said that acute hepatitis is often guised as symptoms being flu-like symptoms, very similar. I mean, you and I have the discussion so often, and all the symptoms I mentioned are linked into, that sounds like flu. But also with hepatitis, your body's immune system should be able to address it. But if it does get worse, you will identify chronic fatigue, the flu-like symptoms get worse, and there could be a slight pain in the area of the liver. When that begins to happen, go it out and check with your doctor what is going on, right? That's number one. And number two is just be mindful of your body. You need to be aware of your body, because if you're not aware of your body, then what are you going to do? So if you are unsure, please go to your nearest clinic, go to your doctor and let them do those blood tests. But also, what I do is when I go for my annual medicals and my annual blood tests, I do a full panel. I want to know what's happening on the inside of my body. What am I at risk of? What antibodies are present? And the liver function test is a critical one to have done, and that is something that is so important.
That's incredibly true. I mean, our liver plays such an important function, in terms of being happy and healthy. Now, I also want to ask you, what can we do better for our liver health? What can we do better in terms of nutrition, maybe even supplements, lifestyle? What can we do better to support our livers?
The research has shown that to support your livers to minimize an impact if you don't have hepatitis or any one of the viral hepatitis infections is a nutritious diet with green veggies and the right foods, cutting out processed foods, not putting your liver under strain, cutting out fatty foods, because there is something called fatty liver disease. So the liver is a highly resilient but sensitive organ, but a critical organ. And cutting out the processed foods. You then need to exercise, mitigate stress, because you want to decrease the cortisol in the body. You want to maximize the body's ability of blood flow. You want to utilize the red blood cells to provide oxygen, because the liver helps get rid of older red blood cells, right? And break them down. So those are some of the habits you've got to follow. But the key ones, if you do drink alcohol, stop. If you do smoke, stop. And those are things that you need to practice. And above that, the lifestyle habits of, sharing blood and, being open to that. And, if someone gets a cut, you want to touch it, be very careful. Hand hygiene practices in your own home are critical. Wash the fruits and veggies when you buy them, the meats when you prepare them at home. I'm very conscious of takeout restaurants. I want to see the kitchens and know what's happening. And lastly, practice safe sex if that is something that you are engaging in.
Thank you for sharing, Ronald. Now, you mentioned the importance of vaccinations, and we have talked a lot about vaccinations, particularly on this segment. Can you address the importance of vaccinations regarding hepatitis? How can our viewers at home actually get access to these types of vaccinations? Do they need to visit a GP first? How does the process work?
So babies are on a vaccination schedule. So from 1995, 1998, when they brought this in to the country, hepatitis B is part of the vaccination protocol of the babies. Now, there's a couple of vaccinations that they get over a period of time, and hepatitis is in 2 or 3 of those. But the question is, what about those that haven't been vaccinated, and even before that? Hey, I'm in that generation. I wasn't vaccinated when I was a baby for hepatitis, right? There is new research and science that says you can get the vaccination at any stage in life, or even further on downstream. But the reality is that, is it too late? Do you have certain liver disease? Is your liver already at risk? I don't know. But rather go to your GP, get the answers from them, do a full medical with them, and they can, of course, either order the vaccine in or refer you to a vaccination clinic where they will definitely have access and stock to it. But to the moms out there, you could even get hepatitis transferred from mom to baby. That is why the baby hepatitis, the vaccination when they are babies is so important. And also you get autoimmune hepatitis, alcoholic hepatitis. So it's beyond just A, B, C, D, E. It actually goes into a variety of others that you need to be aware of.
What is the key message, that you would like to leave with viewers this evening regarding hepatitis? I mean, we've just observed World Hepatitis Day. What is the message that you would like to leave with our viewers regarding hepatitis, since there are so many different variations and so many different ways in which we can all be at risk of hepatitis? What is your message today?
You only realize how important something is when you don't have it anymore, or when the function is impeded. Why do we wait till it's too late? To the best of your ability, get your kids vaccinated, but also look after your health, practice those safe tips. And the last thing would be is, what sticks with me in my mind is that when I went to visit one of the hospitals and engaged with the organ donation foundation, and I met a young girl that was in her teens. Her skin was so yellow, her eyes were yellow, she was so jaundiced, and she was on top of the list for a liver transplant that could save her life. And she was on that list for years, and that was out of her control because she wasn't vaccinated. And that sticks with me still to today. You don't know what you have until you've lost it, and your body is a gift. Look after it, don't disregard it.
Now, there's definitely a lot of conversation on social media platforms about anti-vaxxers, and especially a lot of new moms who are very against the idea of vaccinations, even though it is kind of a prerequisite for kids to be able to get into schools nowadays. What would your message be to parents out there that are a little bit skeptical about all these different types of vaccines that they are, subjecting their young children to, and the importance of actually making sure that our young children are vaccinated?
When we look at things like polio that's been eradicated because of a vaccine, when we look at measles that can be eradicated with a vaccine, the vaccines that the kids are getting right now, and the babies in particular, the science has shown that it mitigates their risk of contracting, but if they do contract that condition, it minimizes the intensity of that condition. I don't know. I think of it as, I look at the kids and, would you want to do anything in this world to protect your kids? And if that is one of the things that science has proven year after year after year that protects millions of kids, do you really want to step back? And then what if one day, God willing, it does not happen? One of your kids gets hepatitis, because, especially hepatitis B, which is common in South Africa, because you chose not to vaccinate. What do you do when they're laying in the hospital bed? And how then do you justify the decision you made back then because of your own fears?
Absolutely. That was very powerfully said. Thank you so much, Ronald, for joining us this evening and for shedding light and information regarding World Hepatitis Day that was observed on the 28th of July. It's really important that we have access to this kind of information, because just listening to our conversation today and learning from you, there's so many different ways and forms in which we can actually be exposed to hepatitis and the different variations that do exist. It's important that, we have these kinds of discussions so we know that what our options are, we know what the risks are. We know that food hygiene is incredibly important. We learn the importance of taking care of our liver as well. And then also for our young parents and expecting parents and young moms out there, knowing the options and why they're so important to be able to give your child access to these vaccines, because they are life-saving at the end of the day. But thank you so much, Ronald, for joining us this evening and for sharing your wisdom and insight with us this evening.
Always a pleasure.
Viewers at home, that was our resident wellness expert, Ronald Abvajee, and we were talking about World Hepatitis Day. Let us know your comments on all our social media platforms. Do engage with us. Let us know, are you an anti-vaxxer? Why are you still an anti-vaxxer? It's important for you to know that. And remember, something that Ronald always emphasizes on this segment is to make sure you are doing your annual health checkups. It's important to know what's going on with your body and how you can take back control, how you can maintain a healthy lifestyle. And in doing so, knowing what's wrong and where to address, what issues do you need to address, how to change your lifestyle to be able to mitigate risks of developing these kinds of illnesses are very important. So definitely add that to your list on your annual health checkup that you should be getting at least once a year. But let us know your thoughts on our social media platforms as well. But on that note, it is time for us to take an ad break and we'll come right back.